Kenny Payne has emerged as the overwhelming fan favorite to fill the vacant University of Louisville head men's basketball position. We'll discuss that and two candidates at high-profile jobs that also have been talked about for the position on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Happy Monday. Welcome into another week of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time personally to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. Over the weekend, a couple things happened. Number one, Auburn head coach Bruce Pearl agreed to a contract extension with the university, a 10-year deal that will likely conclude his coaching career down in Alabama. But on the other hand, Kenny Payne seemingly became the overwhelming fan favorite in the past couple days. We'll discuss that phenomenon while also talking about Eric Musselman and Nate Oats' candidacy for the open position and how feasible both of their hires would be for the university. And then finally, the men's basketball team did lose on Saturday to the top 10 ranked Duke Blue Devils at the KFCM Center. Despite the loss, it was an encouraging performance from interim head coach Mike Peguesa's team. We'll discuss everything you need to know about that contest. But before we get into the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. Also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. You can check out my personal Twitter in the graphic at the bottom left-hand of your screen. In the podcast Twitter page is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into it. Over the weekend, it seemed like with each passing day, Kenny Payne's popularity among the fan base in terms of this coaching hire grew and grew to where we are now. This is being recorded on Sunday afternoon, but Monday, it continually grows. Now, a lot of that has been somewhat of a shift in ideology from, okay, if not Kenny Payne, who would Louisville go out and get? Bruce Pearl seemed like a pipe dream, and it ended up being that, agreeing to that big, extremely huge contract extension with Auburn. But outside of that, we talked about the possible candidates that were unrealistic, the guys in the NBA like Billy Donovan, Brad Stevens, etc. And then the coaches in college, like it's very, improbable that you see guys like, Scott Drew, Jay Wright, top tier college coaches at the moment. So I think for Louisville fans, some that I'm close with, the shift came from the realization is, okay, if not Kenny Payne, who else would get the position? Who realistically could get the position? I think that's where you see a lot of people jump on the Payne train, so to speak. But I'm not saying that there's no other candidates out there that fit the description of what Louisville needs or would succeed here at Louisville. I'm not saying that. I'm not disrespecting any of the candidates. We'll talk about two in the next segment that are pretty solid head coaches that I think would both do very well in the Derby City. But ultimately, I feel like Kenny Payne is kind of the clear-cut choice at the moment for a ton of the fan base. And you're seeing, excuse me, you're seeing that through the overwhelming backing and support from, former players. Boo Brewer, who coaches at Bardstown. He's been big on the Kenny Payne train. Etc. Tom Thibodeau, New York Knicks head coach, has been adamant, endorsing him for the position, and then multiple media personnel like, Seth Greenberg, Dick Vitale, so on and so forth, Jay Billis, etc. They see this as a no-brainer hire for Louisville, and I think that you're starting to see a lot of fans kind of jump on that train, the Payne train, so to speak. But ultimately, and another phenomenon that came out, Jeremy Wallman, very good friend of the show, comes on usually for a weekly appearance, Cardinal Sports Zone co-founder and now current editor. he came out on Sunday, broke the news that Kenny Payne was in town and set to prepare for his interview with the university. There were some that opposed that, saying, "Look, I'm not hearing this. In fact, I'm hearing the exact opposite." I will tell you, I guess you could take everything with a grain of salt because nothing is ever truly concrete. I guess it is, but you see over the weekend, Adam Schefter, one of the best NFL analysts out there for ESPN, reported that Tom Brady was retiring. Well, Brady's camp came out later that day on Saturday and said that the over 40-year-old quarterback has not made a decision. Is nowhere close to that. So some things change here and there. What I will tell you about Jeremy is knowing him personally over the past 2 years and gotten really close to him, I can tell you 100% that he's not going to post something just to post it. He doesn't care about the clout. He doesn't care about the the recognition. He posts things when he, number one, gets the go-ahead to post it, and number two, feels comfortable by doing so. Usually how Jeremy operates is he will hear something, but he will make sure that he cross-checks it with another party to make sure that it is 100% confirmed. He's not going to put something out there that may or may not be true just for the hell of it. That's not how he operates. His motto is, he would rather be right in the last rather than wrong in first. So, for those that are criticizing him out there, I get it, the skepticism. We heard that, Braun was close to a done deal. That ended up not being the case. So, things can change at the last minute. These things are very fluid. We get it. But as of right now, I trust Jeremy. And, assuming that he's correct with, Kenny Payne interviewing, that is the first official interview for the University of Louisville men's head basketball coach position. But, overall, I will say that this is not surprising. I think that Kenny Payne offers a lot of benefits that some of the other options may not necessarily be able to do right away. In terms of uniting the fan base, which is big, bringing some revitalized life and energy surge to the program, which is very much needed. That only a handful of coaches could come in immediately and make that impact right off the bat. I think two of those are two that we could talk about here in just a second. But I will say, with this fan base, I don't think that any hire is going to be made without some opposition. There's going to be people out there that say, "Oh, hey, look, I don't like this guy." You could hire Steve Kerr and people would find a way to not, like it. That's just kind of the nature of, opinions and stuff like that. So overall, a huge nugget from Jeremy that kind of, comes in line with what we've, been kind of reading the tea leaves on, is that, there's a lot of former player backing for Kenny Payne, being a 1986 national champion under Denny Crum, Denny being a guy that has, backed Kenny Payne. There's been a lot of, booster presence that has also voiced their support, and that, could also be a driving force. So overall, right now, it seems like all signs are pointing to Kenny Payne. However, we're going to continue to diligently break down other candidates' cases because, like I mentioned, things change often. I'm not saying that this is going to change. What I will tell you is that, what is true Monday morning may not necessarily be true any longer Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning or Friday at noon. I'm not, referring to any day. It's just kind of, really just epitomizing the fact that things change. They're very fluid. So, I want to take this time now into focusing on, we talked about Bruce Pearl at the end of last week. We'll discuss the other two big-time SEC coaches that have been rumored and linked to this Louisville job the most. That is Alabama head coach Nate Oats and Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman. We will break down both of their candidacies here in just a second after we talk about our friends at GetUpside. Hey, Cardinal fans, this is your host, Dalton Pence, with an app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, GetUpside. My listeners are earning cash back for every gallon of gas every time they fill up. Just download the free GetUpside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use the promo code SCORE for 25 cents per gallon or more off on your first fill-up. Cash back. Don't pay full price at the pump anymore. Get cash back using GetUpside. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 a year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash gets added right back to your account. You can cash out at any time to your bank account, PayPal, e-gift card, Amazon, etc. Just download the free GetUpside app and use the promo code SCORE to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. At this time, as always, I want to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube, 5 days a week, your team every day. Transitioning over into discussing and breaking down two other high-profile Division I head coaches' candidacies for this prestigious Louisville position. We'll start out with Alabama head coach Nate Oats. Nate Oats has been a popular figure in Louisville fan circles and in terms of wanting Oats here in Louisville. Just to kind of break down what Nate Oats has done, he has been a head coach for 7 seasons. He currently has a record of 152-72. That's a 68% winning percentage. To start out his career, he started in 2015-16 at Buffalo, coached 4 seasons in the MAC in his last season, or his past, 3 out of the past 4. 3 of his 4 years at Buffalo, he made the NCAA tournament. Most notably, the one 2017-18, which he led the he led Buffalo over Arizona in a 4-13 matchup. That was a huge upset. They ended up losing to Kentucky in the next round, but C.J. Massenburg, that was a very, very solid team that Nate Oats had. And then the past 3 years, he has been at Alabama. Started out 16-15, 26-7 last year. Made it to the NCAA tournament as the 2 seed in the tournament, and now he is 14-7 currently. Alabama hasn't necessarily been as good as everyone previously thought they were going to be, but overall, Nate Oats is a very solid coach in my opinion. He's a solid recruiter. You look at what Alabama has done on the 2022 cycle. They have multiple 5-stars committed. In terms of his coaching style, this is always kind of taken with a grain of salt, but I will tell you, his teams are very solid 3-point shooting wise. He recruits a lot of extremely solid athletes. Very solid on the defensive end. All of his teams, whether at Buffalo or whether at Alabama, have always been very stingy defensively, very good on ball, and they like to overall get a lot of pressure on opposing ball handlers. One of the reasons why I think that Nate Oats might not necessarily be a feasible option for Louisville is because of the fact that he has a $12 million buyout right now. Now, obviously, Louisville was able to cut Chris Mack's $12 million buyout into an agreement that costed the university $4.8 million. They will pay out, I believe, over the next 3 seasons. So I'm not saying it's impossible because, if Louisville wants to break the bank and go get Oats, I'm not saying they don't have the money to do so. What I'm saying is it's improbable. They would have to be 100% sold on Oats, being the coach, and that's, not considering the fact of what he wants his salary to be. Currently, he makes, I believe it's less than $3.5 million, but you would have to assume that he pushes for, a Chris Mack level salary. So ultimately, I think Nate Oats, option-wise, sorry, I don't know, I get a little parched when I have to talk for 30 minutes at a time, but ultimately, back to where we were. Yeah, I mean, Nate Oats, I would love to have him here. I think he'd be a very good recruiter. I think he does, really well with developing players and getting, freshmen that are able to come in and play right away. That's a couple of the benefits. The drawbacks is, like I mentioned, that contract is big, $12 million buyout. Also, not to mention the fact that, Alabama's kind of struggled a little bit this year, but they did beat Baylor over the weekend, so there is still a ton of talent. So Nate Oats, although he is, in my opinion, a great option that Louisville could look at the end of the day, you have to wonder, would the Cardinals be committed to paying that buyout? Another guy in the SEC that I've seen a lot of people talk about is Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman. Musselman started out his career at Nevada. Like Oats, this is his 7th season as a head coach. He is 171-58 as a head coach, about a 75% winning percentage. So, he is, very, very solid in terms of being the head guy. 3 out of the 4 seasons at Nevada. They made the tournament. They were they were one of those teams that, was a Cinderella story in the 2017-18 season in which they went 29-8. Had single-digit losses in his last 3 seasons at Nevada. Currently at Arkansas, his first year in 2019, they were 20-12. This past season, 25-7. They made the NCAA tournament and made a decent run, and currently now 16-5. Kind of like Alabama. They struggled out of the gate a little bit, looking like they're riding the ship, so to speak. So, people will kind of use the fact that both of their teams struggling this year. They'll use that as kind of a justification as to why they shouldn't be, members of the job. But currently, I think right now he would be a solid option as well. One of the reasons why I think he'd be a little bit more appealing than Nate Oats is that if he finishes the season, I believe his buyout goes from $7.5 million to, I think it's like $2 million. So it's like a $5.5 million deduction, which is huge because, $2 million versus 7.5 or even 2 versus 12 is incredibly, it's a huge difference. So ultimately, one thing that I think Eric Musselman does extremely well is the fact that he gets a lot of newcomers to come in and play well with each other. One thing we saw in Nevada, and I kind of joke around, is that Eric Musselman is like transfer you. And I don't mean that in like a negative connotation or anything like that. I think it's more of a praise for him being able to bring in a ton of transfers into the program, and they mesh really well, and they play, very solid. You talk about Jordan Caroline, the Martin brothers, etc. in that Nevada program, and they were able to do some very, very solid things in 2018, some solid things in 2019. So, Arkansas this past season, they were a 3 seed. They made a decent run, and ultimately now they're 16-5. And that's another thing with Arkansas is they've added, a handful of pieces from other programs, and he's gotten them play together. And I think that was one of the things to where for Louisville, we kind of looked at this in, coming into the season, like, okay, that's what Louisville needs to do. They need to bring all these pieces in that they're bringing in and be able to mesh them together and have some good chemistry. Unfortunately, that wasn't proven to be the case, and I think that's one of the things that makes Eric Musselman very appealing in this day and age with the NIL, with with the one-time transfer rule. Is he's a very solid recruiter. He's gotten some 5-star recruits. Also, he's also been able to get guys in the one-time transfer rule and even sit-out transfers and having them play solid together. I will say, he's one of those guys. When I was looking up, how other opposing fan bases felt. A lot of people say opposing fans don't like him, but when he's your head coach, you love him. But I feel like that kind of is one of those things to where a lot of people kind of fit in that in that mold. John Calipari, Mike Krzyzewski, Bill Self, Mark Few, etc. Everybody. If you're winning games, opposing fan bases aren't going to like you anyway. But I think he's more of a feasible option than Alabama. I think that Louisville is obviously a better job than Alabama, better job than Arkansas. It's really just a matter of, would Louisville be willing to, pull the trigger on a guy like Musselman or Oats? I think that Musselman's probably a more feasible option, more likely due to that buyout situation. But ultimately, I think that they are 2 very, very solid options. Kind of on the outside looking in, like I mentioned in the first segment, Kenny Payne is the overwhelming fan favorite, but it wouldn't surprise me to see Josh Hurd and company interview both Musselman and Oats here in the coming weeks. So we will see how that transpires. I want to take this time now to kind of take a step back from the coaching search. We'll continue that tomorrow. But I want to now dive into the weekend results. The men's basketball team lost at home to the Duke Blue Devils 74-65 on Saturday. We'll talk about everything you need to know about that matchup and why, despite losing, it was an encouraging outcome. So we'll do that after we talk about our friends at Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fitter, eating healthier, you need to include Built Bar in that plan. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good, you'll want to eat it. if you want to eat healthy, sometimes it gets boring. Look, I get it. By this time, you're thinking, is it worth it to do this? Well, at this time, Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, so they're not waxy, they're not chalky or hard to you choke down or anything like that. Most Built Bars are very healthy. You get the good taste while also being plain nice to eat. So do yourself a favor, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's using the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. On Saturday, like I mentioned, 74-65 defeat for the Louisville men's basketball team to the 9th-ranked Duke Blue Devils. A great ceremony at the beginning. Former Louisville head basketball coach Danny Crum meeting Mike Krzyzewski for his farewell tour. And, Krzyzewski definitely was blown away by the presentation that they had, which, obviously, they're kind of, mixed feelings with Coach K, but, the game will definitely miss him. But in terms of the game, I liked the energy that I saw from the team. Obviously, people will talk about that 12-0 run that Duke had when the game was 60-60. Duke, went out 72-60. There was about a 5-minute drought. Overall, Paulo Banchero didn't necessarily shoot the ball well from the field, had 11 points, but 15 rebounds. That was kind of the name of the game here in this one for the Cardinals. Duke out-rebounded Louisville 47-34. They had 20 offensive rebounds. Both shot under 37% from three, under 43%, or I'm sorry, under 45% from the field. So statistically from the field, they kind of they did what you thought they would, under less turnovers for both teams. But ultimately, loved what I saw from Dre Davis in this one. It was 7 for 13 from the field, had 16 points and 3 blocks. Malik Williams had 10 points, 12 rebounds. Sidney Curry, there was a story after the game where I'm not sure the validity of it, but if it is true, it speaks volumes to these players' characters. It basically was on the lines of in the tunnel afterwards, Sidney Curry broke down on the floor and became emotional. And I think that is the mindset that you need to have for this program. You need to have guys like that. And I thought that the energy was reminiscent of the Baha Mar little invitational on Thanksgiving week. And, it seems like these guys really, really love playing for Mike Pegues. And, Alan Thomas from the state of Louisville and T-shirt hooligan tweeted out, he said, look, Mike Pegues might not necessarily be the head coach here next year, but it's no doubt that he is definitely showing that he is a head coach somewhere. And I definitely could not agree more with that statement. Ultimately, I think that this is an opportunity for him to really showcase his talents. But at the end of the day, I think that when you discuss what you saw from the Cards this weekend, ultimately, it was just an encouraging game. Ellis had, I think, a game high 18 points, something along those lines. He was 7 for 16 from the field. Sam Williamson had 3 points, and the other guys had less than less than 3 as well on the off the bench. So ultimately, very solid addition to the program. Were both Sidney Curry and Ellis. Hopefully, they are going to stick around for the next head coach, as well as a handful of the other guys that make up this nucleus. But yeah, like I said, I'm not necessarily a huge moral victory guy, but at the end of the day, it seems like the tournament is kind of it's in a far off distance. It's probably a pipe dream at this moment. The Cardinals are 11-10 on the season, so they would basically have to win the ACC tournament to even be considered. Or if they win the ACC tournament, they're going to get an automatic bid. What am I saying? But ultimately, you get the point. The fact of the matter is, they are squarely on the outside of the tournament bubble right now. So I think a lot of it now is just continually playing for pride. Playing for dignity and playing hard, finishing the season out on a good note, in hopes to carry that momentum over into the 2022-23 season. But ultimately, I couldn't be happier with the game. I thought that Duke was going to win. I thought it was probably going to be about 15 points. It ended up being 9, and Louisville was right there 60-60 at the under 8 timeout. So some things that we need to work on. Obviously, the scoring drought and stuff like that. being better, rebounding wise. But Duke has a very, very good, front court. They have a lot of size. So ultimately, it's just a matter of getting everything, clicking and stuff like that. So we will continue to talk about this team throughout the season. Before we get out here, a couple quick shout outs first to the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. The most recent episode is being recorded or was recorded yesterday. So it's likely out now. You can get that at cardinalsportszone.com. Also, the Locked On Bets podcast hosted by your boy Q with handicapping expert analysis from Lee Sterling. You can get that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. A quick note, there was a little mishap with the Locked On Podcast Network in terms of the pod's YouTube page. I was made aware that there's a different YouTube that they created. So the past 5 or 6 videos from this podcast that are up on YouTube right now that you all have viewed very solidly, you can find that at the other YouTube, which will likely be up in commission here in the next day or so. I will send out a tweet. I will keep reminding you all, and obviously you'll see the new page. So if you're a subscriber to the YouTube page and you're like, okay, why is he not posting any videos? Don't be alarmed. It's because it's on a different YouTube channel now. So be sure to keep that in mind. That's going to wrap up this Monday edition of the show. There is a football recruiting bonus episode that will be released today at some point. So check that out. Everyone have a great start to your week, and go Cardinals.